back to thinking about the blame and the shame that parents often put on them when their child has to go to therapy, if we could think about it as a societal challenge, a societal issue, rather than it individually a parent problem, that we're raising this child.
Welcome to the Unapparent Podcast, the place that delivers deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting. My name is Katia Lindor, and I am your host. Join us as we debunk myths surrounding parenthood and provide an empathetic, judgment-free space for parents and parents to be. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Unapparent Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Samantha Schindelheim. Dr. Samantha is a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in working with young children, teens, young adults, and their parents who struggle with behavioral challenges, self-esteem, relationships, mood, anxiety, trauma, and life cycle transitions. Dr. Schindelheim has specific training and certifications in dialectical behavioral therapy for adolescents, cognitive behavioral therapy, parent-child interaction therapy, and parent management training. She is passionate about teaching concrete therapeutic skills that have been proven to help individuals and families overcome various challenges. Her ultimate goal is to provide validation, support, and tangible improvements to people she works with on a daily basis. Additionally, she is passionate about increasing high-quality care for children, adolescents, and their families through the delivery of evidence-based interventions. Hi, welcome to our show.
Hi, Katia. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for your time. And I gave a little bit of your background, but if you want to, add or give your own version of that.
Sure. No, I mean, you said it. I work with children, adolescents, and parents. Parents is a big part of what I do. I love working with parents. And I also didn't let you all know, but I teach too at Columbia. I'm an adjunct professor in the School of Social Work. So I think that's helpful because so much of parenting work that I do is around teaching strategies and also myself learning from parents and learning from my students. So.
Right. Oh, amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that piece of information.
Yeah, so
very
just
cool.
Want to add that.
Yes, that is important. And you are a mom yourself.
I am, yes.
You have a toddler.
Yes, I have a daughter, Isabella. She's 17 months, almost 18 months at the end of June, and she's wonderful.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, this is that parenting journey that is so beautiful and challenging, and you working with kids. How has becoming a mom impacted your career?
Yeah. So much. I mean, when I was working in my previous full-time job, I was working with children and adolescents, and I felt like a fraud in the sense that I didn't have my own kid and I was giving advice to parents around how to parent. Now it feels much more valid, but I'm even more on the spotlight of what am I doing? And so I think that's been a bit scary at times, but also really rewarding. I think I've learned so much from my own work about how to play with my Isabella, how to talk to her about emotions, and really get on the floor and do things with her. So I think that's been really wonderful. And knowing about child development, too, has been helpful in that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because people like me, right, who don't have any kind of professional background in children, it's like we don't know what we're doing. It's scary as it is, right?
Yeah.
But then there's that interesting element to where like you should know on paper what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But the practical, actual, like tangible parenting skills, it's totally different on paper versus in real life, right?
Absolutely. And it gives me so much more empathy for the parents that I work with. I'm like, okay, this is what you're really talking about. Right. I hear ya.
Mm-hmm. So what can you tell us about, the therapy you do with children? As I understand it, a lot of that is with the parents as well.
Yeah. So I do different types of parent work. I do what's called parent-child interaction therapy. And that type of therapy tends to be with children around 4 to 7 years old. It can be a little younger, could be a little bit older. But the crux of that type of intervention is all around play. And it's teaching the parent how to have a strong bond with their child, how to play with that through play. So it's how to give them skills such as praises and talking about what they're doing with their hands when they're rolling cars down, around the floor, all of that. And then it also has a second phase where I'm teaching the parent how to incorporate behavioral techniques, how to get their child to listen, how to follow through with different tasks. So in that sense, it's really wonderful because it involves both the parent and the child. And then I do other parenting work that just involves the parent, where I'm creating a strong relationship where they can trust me, the parent, where they feel like I really get where they are. We talk about their parental history in the sense of, how were they parented? What were some of the things that, we all experience trauma. What was the trauma that they experienced, perhaps from a parent, not a parent, but someone in their life who was telling them what to do, maybe, or someone they looked up to. So we do that work. And then we talk about strategies and skills. How can I make things a little bit easier for their relationship with their child? And it's all about building that relationship. That's the core of everything.
Right. So I feel that there's been sort of a shift in consciousness in more recent years where adults are seeking therapy. Mental health has become a big, I guess it's just become more understood how important it is to seek that help as, adults. But it seems to be a little more taboo or less talked about when it comes to seeking it for your children, right?
Yeah.
What can you talk to us about, I guess, that piece, and also how would you recommend, or I don't know if there's this, like, obviously it's not a blanket statement, but what kind of parent or what kind of help are they usually seeking when they come to you, right?
Yeah.
Or what would you recommend in an ideal world when to seek a child therapist?
Yeah. Well, to answer the first part, I think you're right that adults for the most part are saying, I want to understand myself better. I want to understand my relationships in my life. And there's a lot more acceptance around that. For children, it's not the child that's going to often say, I need help. It's going to have to come from the parent. And with that comes shame and guilt and what did I do wrong? Or my child's crazy. What's going on with them? And that creates fear and, avoidance of wanting to put your child in therapy. So I think that that's a big piece there. And I love it, actually, when I do have a parent that says, my child asked me to go to therapy. So I think that's a big piece of this. But then to answer the next part of your question, I think that a big piece of what I look at in a parent is and oftentimes they come to me when they're in crisis, what I call, where they're saying, I don't know what to do. My child has these explosive tantrums, or they, never talk to me, let's say an adolescent, a teenager, and I don't know how to talk to them about what's going on. I'm so scared that something really bad is going on. And so it's oftentimes where I talk about we're in crisis phase at the beginning of treatment, and I'm trying to understand more of what's happening. And then as we start developing skills and being able to really process and understand the relationship, the parent-child relationship, we're calm and we're processing and talking about this. But it's oftentimes when a parent feels like they're in crisis, they don't know what to do with their kid.
Okay. That makes sense. And many times, even as adults, I feel like we think therapy is only for when you're like going crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I have a view of it as more, like not just prevention, but like wellness, right?
Absolutely.
Like going to the gym, you're not going to start going when you have like diabetes, God forbid, or when you develop some sort of health crisis, right?
Yeah.
Health issue. So you want to start doing it for your well-being. And that's how I view therapy for myself, right? It's upkeep and wellness, and it's just as important as physical health, right? Even more so, I would say, because it's tied directly to your physical health, right? But for children, is that sort of a way you can look at it as well, that before reaching maybe crisis mode, not that you think you're going to reach that point, right? I don't think as parents we ever think that that's going to be the case. But say at what point would you think it's appropriate to say, hey, let me just take my child to therapy, even though we're not in crisis mode right now?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually the best part. And I agree with you. I love how you phrase that around mental wellness. Mental health is so even more important than physical health. We need it. And we should, and I hope that we want it all too. And I think that parents and kids, I want them to come to me when they want the skills rather than needing the skills, right? And feeling like, oh, I could really benefit from this. I think that back to thinking about the blame and the shame that parents often put on them when their child has to go to therapy, if we could think about it as a societal challenge, a societal issue, rather than it individually a parent problem, that we're raising this child. And I would love for America to be like, Latin countries in the sense of, collectivism and everyone is the village and embracing the child and parenting them. In the United States, it's such an individualistic society, and we don't think that way. But my hope is that we do understand that, it's biological, it's society, it's the way we think about kids, it's social media, it's the way we prioritize children in our lives that really impact and create some of the problems that we're seeing, and especially I'm seeing in therapy with my clients. And so my hope, though, is that we can understand that it's really just for building wellness and skills and strategies. There's so many books out there for parenting, but we aren't born with this knowledge. And so unless you're willing to read and get that knowledge there, working with someone is actually so much better because you can talk through individual challenges.
Yeah, I love what you said. And it's so true that this is a very individualistic nation. Our culture is just so anti, or I don't want to say anti, but it's very adult-centered, and just that it just erases the mother and the child from systems that are, in place that just really don't take into consideration the impact, or, by removing that element of, okay, let's think about mom and child. There's so many spaces that feel like they're not meant for us, right? And as as you mentioned, so much of probably the root of a lot of these issues that you're seeing is we don't, as a society, we also don't have the village, as you say. It's something that you have to find on your own. And I talk about this a lot on some of my episodes about how also it's more common nowadays that you move away from your family and your village. And finding that village away from home is so hard, especially for, people coming from other countries. And maybe there's a language barrier, maybe there's a cultural, it's just so different, I think. And then having the access to the kind of help like a mental health therapist, all of these things that I think should be just part of your wellness journey, right? And it's something that you have to have access to that in order to get it, right?
Oh, yes. Access in the mental health world is such a trigger word for me because it's not there. We don't have enough access for everyone, and it's really upsetting. And I think, you're hitting it on the nail in the sense that there's so much need and so much desire for that support. And it takes a lot to get there, to want to have that support, right? One, but then also finding it. And I think we're lucky, in New York that we do have a lot of access to that, especially in New York City. But I'm seeing more and more that in more rural states and other states around the country that they don't have for miles and miles a mental health therapist, and getting that access is so hard.
Right. And then there's a whole other story then if your insurance covers it.
Yes. Oh, that's a whole another thing.
Yeah, paying out of pocket, all that. Well, I'm sure we could have a whole episode about that.
We could, and I have strong opinions about that too, as I'm sure most people do.
Yes, I think so. Well, I'm not shy in mentioning where my opinions about that. So I talk about it a lot. So.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think that, insurance companies are just not really able to meet the needs of everyone in the sense of being able to give. I wish we had more universal coverage in the sense that everyone gets mental health. You get a physical doctor, your coverage is there. You also get a mental health professional, and here's your coverage.
Yep, it's so important. And those are barriers that I think as a society we need to push to remove.
Yes.
Because in order to have a healthy society, we need, mentally healthy children and children who become adults, then, healthy adults.
Absolutely.
And speaking of that, after becoming a mom myself, is when I realized some of my challenges from my childhood were due in part to ADHD, which I didn't have a diagnosis for when I was a child, even though I've talked about this before also, how I had my own intuition was telling me that I needed to get checked.
Yeah.
And, I did get checked, and I was told that I did not have ADHD. It wasn't until my adult life, after becoming a mom, that I was finally, given the validation that,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you were onto something.
Say that's so invalidating.
Yes. So even though I now have, that diagnosis, which is, very validating, I'm still struggling with finding the tools that I wasn't able to have growing up because, I didn't have the diagnosis, and I guess the information was just a lot less readily available, especially in Puerto Rico when I was growing up. And so as a kid, I didn't develop the tools necessary to deal with the impulsivity and emotional regulation. Those are the pieces that I really still to this day struggle with. But, I struggled with my whole life growing up. And now as a mom of a toddler and a baby, right? These are really difficult stages for me in parenting because of the patience element, the emotional regulation. Like as a parent, it's so important for you to help your child regulate their emotions. And when I struggle regulating my own, it's like, how do I help my child regulate theirs? And so I have that intellectual piece where I know better, but doing better is a big struggle for me. So that's one of the things where I could personally, use your help and go to, seek your professional help, because it's something I struggle with a lot, and especially now as a parent. So I guess I just want to ask, what are your strategies, and in what ways is this maybe a topic that you see and you help your patients?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always tap into some of the adversities that parents have had in the past in their struggles. And one, I would tap into your, being invalidated with your diagnosis. And I think that bringing out some of the strengths of that, even though it was such a hard experience, I imagine, of saying look how far you've come and look what you're able to do. I also see ADHD sometimes most times as a superpower, in the sense that you can see so much more than someone who doesn't, is, not neurodivergent in that sense. But I think, the biggest piece, and you're saying regulate with your child together, we call it co-regulation, is just the beauty of it is that there are some really simple tools that parents can have that I think when you're overstimulated, when you're dysregulated and feeling like, oh my God, I can't get my child to calm down, or I just need quiet for 1 second. The biggest piece is using your own self-coping tools. And so whether that's a deep breathing strategy, and you're going to kind of let your child still act the way they're acting until you can calm down, because they're not going to be able to co-regulate with you until you're regulated. So that's a big piece here. And whether that's going into the bathroom, locking the door and screaming your head off in a safe place where they can't hear you, or, listening to music. I love dance parties, doing putting on some music, and you're like, I absolutely don't want to listen to this wild music, but it's going to be helpful. I know Dr. Sam said it. So trying that, because then your child could also be distracted by that and perhaps regulate. But for yourself to regulate first is the biggest piece of trying to tap into that, and being accepting of, okay, I'm not going to be able to solve this issue right now until I feel a little bit better. And I notice my breathing is more regulated, my heartbeat's going down. And so the other piece I think next is validating your child and saying, and yourself really, and saying, I get this. It makes sense that we're upset. It makes sense that you're not feeling well right now, whatever it is, so that they can take a deep breath. And then having the skills in that sense of saying, together, let's do breathing. Let's do what we call pizza breathing, where we do blow on a slice of pizza together, or blowing out birthday candles, and really giving them the tools that you're learning too of how to regulate, right, in a child-friendly way.
Yeah.
And then after that, we want to praise them, and we want to say, I love praise as a strategy in general. And what I like to also teach a lot of the parents I work with are labeled praises. So oftentimes which is great, you're saying good job, you're doing a good job, you're doing it. However, we're not labeling what we like that the child is doing. And so I see that confidence is built by them understanding, oh, mom really likes that I was able to calm down here. I'm so proud of you for being able to calm down. I'm so proud of you for being able to take a walk with me, and really labeling their behavior of what they're doing, so that then they say, okay, this is what I'm going to try to do next time when I'm feeling this way. And I think backtracking it a little bit before that even, I want to help you identify your emotions in the moments notice that you're dysregulated. What's going on for you? How are you feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? You want to do that with your child too. So we also call this modeling. So what I'm teaching you, or I'm teaching, anyone, is that, you can do with your child.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I
Yeah.
do have, my weekly therapy sessions, and I talk about this with my therapist a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first things that she told me was about feeling my body, like
Yeah.
where I'm feeling like, because sometimes what I told her also was my problem when I was, little was just explosiveness. Like it's seeming like came out of nowhere, but obviously you can feel it in your body coming, and then it's explosion.
Yeah. 0 to 100.
Right. It's the 0 to 100 in that like instant.
Yeah.
And so, obviously as a child though, you don't have that piece of like, okay, let me think before, I do something. So I'm undoing a lot of that, because I never learned it.
Yeah.
I never learned it well. And I think there's a lot of it was my mom telling me like, you need to cool off, you need to do this. And so like, I knew that I had to do this, but I didn't have the tools to do it. Right.
Yep.
So that left me with a lot of like, I think shame about my own faults, right? And my own lack of being able to self-regulate. And so that shame has been carried into, now my life as a mom. And now I know how parents can, for better or for worse, impact their child's lives, right? And that's you're so acutely aware of the impact you have on your child, and you hope that you're impacting them positively, but that, we're human. And so we are, we're not perfect. And in moments where I feel, awful because I didn't react appropriately, I guess, with my toddler, I'll go back and I'll try to apologize and be like, I didn't react the way I wanted to, and I should have. And, then she'll tell me, I didn't like when you did this. I didn't like when you did that. And, I'll listen to her. And so a lot of it for me has been like, I'm not always going to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
But having that repair element, I think, is huge, because she then is able to let out how she's feeling when I'm no longer like mad or yelling at her.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to her, and all she asks for at the end of the day, she's like, I just want a hug, and I give her a hug.
Yeah. And it's so great too that she was able to say, this is what was bothering me, instead of saying, it's okay, Mom, thanks for apologizing. Nothing like that.
Yeah, I've noticed,
shaking you off.
Right. And I've noticed that when I apologize to her, that's when she's able to like feel like, okay, she's going to listen to me when I tell her what upset me.
Yep.
And I do, and I listen to her. And we do the smelling the flower and blowing out the candle. And she, we do that sometimes. Sometimes she doesn't want to do it. Other times she will do it with me. And the other day I was upset about something, and she told me, Mom, blow. Oh, she's like, smell the flower and blow the candle. And I wanted to just cry, because it was the sweetest moment where she was like, it's okay. And she was patting me on the back, and then she told me to do that. And I was a mess after that, because I'm like, that's so sweet.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
She's learning so much.
Yeah. I mean, she's a fast learner too. Yeah. So I'm like, I know that I'm not the perfect example. I don't model what I really, really want them to learn, because I lacked it, growing up. But it's something that I really want to learn and relearn correctly, so that I can model it for them in a way that, they deserve.
Yeah. And we're human. We are going to make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think being real with your kids as much as we can in terms of our feelings and where we're at is so important. And you're right, that repair is everything. Mm-hmm. Acknowledging when you might have messed up is so, so important.
Yeah.
And to your point around the shame, and I think that the skill that I love to teach is validation, is how to validate your own emotions and your child's emotions, because that really gets them to start regulating and saying, okay, Mom hears me. She's got it. She knows I'm upset. Mm-hmm. And that step and that is able to really make a huge difference in their whole regulation path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In retrospect, I know a lot of what I was missing was that validation of me just feeling like, not only do I have all these big feelings and I'm mad and I'm upset and I don't even know what else I feel because I can't really pinpoint it. I just know that I'm not being heard and I don't feel validated and I'm just being like shut out, like, go deal with your big emotions. Yeah. And when you're done, come back.
Yeah.
And sometimes practically that's after you've tried and your kid is just having a total meltdown. Sometimes that's all you can do. We're just like,
Yes.
right, calm down and then we can talk. But other times it's just like, for me, it just left me feeling like kind of just out alone in this big world of emotions where I don't know what to do with all of these emotions, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and then the self-hatred just develops and it's awful.
Yeah, for sure. So you do at-home sessions?
Yeah. So I do a combination. I've noticed, in my old job, I was doing home-based crisis intervention work. So I was working in families' homes with dealing with real crisis around acute concerns around suicide risk and aggression for mostly adolescents and middle schoolers. And so I really found that the home visits were so important and doing in-home therapy, like long-term, where I can observe the family environment. I'm able to see, what's going on in vivo is like what I call it. Also helping some kids that I work with have really bad anxiety where it's hard for them to leave the home or they're not able to make it to school. So being able to do exposure therapy where I can coach the parent on, let's not accommodate this. Let's try to get them. We can show them through validation and we don't have to,
force them out of their comfort zone.
Exactly, where it makes them feel even worse. So there's a lot of great work that can be done there. And also convenience with little kids who are really having a hard time leaving the home, making it to sessions in an office. It can be really challenging and stressful for the parent, and all of the skills go out the drain. So to get them to my appointments is just hard. So I like to meet families where they're at when in-home work is helpful. I also do virtual and in an office. So that can be helpful too. Yeah.
So what would at-home session look like?
Yeah. So first, I always like to know tell me about your home. What does it look like? Are there pets? What can I expect? Just to get an idea of what's going on there. Since COVID too, we always have to ask like any recent exposure, sicknesses. And then, we're ready for me to come to the home, and I usually let them lead. And it's wonderful as well, which I didn't mention, just the most important part is the power differential that it lifts. When people come to my office, it's oftentimes like I'm the professional, which I am, but also there's so much you're in charge, you lead this. When it's a family's home, they feel more comfortable. Oftentimes, of course, the first session can be anxiety provoking if someone coming to your home that you don't know, but it's a really nice way to lift that power differential. And so oftentimes I'll say, show me around. Where would you feel comfortable to have this session? I'll meet the family members, maybe the family pets, and then we'll kind of do a normal like you're sitting in an office at intake and just understanding what's going on. I get to see the parent-child interactions. Maybe the child interrupts the parent. Maybe they have a tantrum when I arrive, and I'm able to really see what's going on. And then after that, we start with learning tools and understanding more about what's going on.
Yeah, having at-home sessions must be such a game changer for both, you and the clients. There must be so much benefit from it. I can imagine from a perspective of when you're in, as you said, in a setting, like in an office setting, maybe you don't feel as comfortable. And so you're not as open maybe with, what's happening, what's going on. And then children, obviously, when they're in their comfort zone, they're going to act the way they would, right, on a daily basis, right? They're at home with their parents and it's familiar. And so maybe there's less margin of you not being able to see the full picture, right?
Definitely. I can see a lot more observations, around what the parents are really struggling with much faster. And that's where also I can see there's a lot more progress that happens. I feel like I'm with families, which is sometimes really great for less amount of time because there's, okay, thanks, you helped us, which is great. And so I think that's really helpful too, is that it can be a quicker route to getting answers and support.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'd never thought of it, I guess. But now that you're talking about this, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's very, I guess it's in a very tangible way where parents can be like, okay, you came into our home, you joined basically our day-to-day life,
Yeah.
and that helped us in the practicality of what, the help you provide and that support. So that's amazing.
Yeah. It also helps the relationship, I think, build faster with the parent too, of saying, okay, you see me, you see my child, you see what I'm going through. Like you're saying also that in an office, it can happen much slower in building that relationship. So because the relationship is much faster, the progress and the parent, being bought into doing the work is there much quicker.
Yeah, totally. That makes so much sense. So in terms of like steps and tools that you can just give parents, right? Again, everyone may be struggling with different things, but if there's something general that you could say in terms of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, I think particularly for advice for parents is one, I mean, this is going to be cliche, but asking and saying, I want help is such a huge step, and absolutely like holding that and congratulating yourself for that is just incredible. And then I think, some really concrete strategies that can be helpful. We talked a bit about identifying emotions and helping parents to help their child identify emotions, helping the parent themselves to identify and being able to use that to regulate their emotions. But also I think a big, big piece that I always like to encourage parents to do is being able to, go a little bit deeper in processing. Where is this emotion coming from? Why is this happening for you? And I think that's big, like understanding the triggers. Why is it so upsetting that your child is acting this way? Because a big strategy that I do teach is ignoring when it's appropriate. So appropriate ignoring. And that's really just to not give attention to some of the behaviors that we want to try to get rid of. We always want to validate first your child, so they're not feeling like you're ignoring me in the sense of you don't care, but then using that strategy. And so we really want to understand, like, how can you be able to do some good ignoring in an appropriate way by understanding, first what's going on with the triggers that's getting you so upset. So I think that's important too.
What's an example of appropriate ignoring, just out of curiosity and for everyone listening?
Yeah. So this happened today. I was with a family in their home, and the child just kept kicking the table. And the mom was like, oh, it really bothers me when she does that. And so I was like, okay, let's understand why is this like so, and she has ADHD. So she was very overstimulated, very getting frustrated, overwhelmed. And so once we were able to understand, okay, that really bothers her, we were able to help her, take a break, go into another room, let's take some deep breaths. And so that she could say, I hear you, child, and I get that this is, that you want my attention, and right now I'm doing something for Dr. Sam. And so she was able to do that. She stepped away, and really that after that she just was able to go into her own space, and that was very helpful. And the child stopped. So we want to get the child to understand there are other ways to get positive attention.
Yeah. And the overstimulation element is so real, especially with small children. It's I didn't even realize you could be so overstimulated that like your brain just like stops functioning. Really, you're just like, this is like chaos in my brain right now.
Yeah, I don't have ADHD, and I'm like, if I did, I don't know how I could do this because it is so much when my child is just and there's no room for my thoughts to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And as going back to like validation, even validating yourself as a parent, I feel like I'm still working on it, right? It's such a big element is being able to have grace with myself and be like, there's a reason this is difficult. Like, it's hard, and it's not just me struggling, right? It's not just because I'm lacking or I'm weak or, I'm the one with the problem, right? It's hard. It's hard work. And I'm doing the work to hopefully reach a place where it becomes a little bit less challenging. Never easy. It's never going to be easy. No. But less of a challenge, perhaps.
Yeah. That's why I also ask all the parents I work with, I'm like, do you have a parent friend? A friend that is also a parent that you can chat with? And if they don't, I'm like, let me get you a group right now, because it's so important to have that community for other people to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't understand it unless you've been through it or going through it. And that's so real. That was something also and again, why maybe that the phase in which my podcast was born in my first postpartum stage, where I was just feeling so isolated, so, alone, because I didn't have those parent friends, close parent friends, right, who could understand me and be like, oh girl, yeah, that happens to me too. And, I go through this every day, and all of those feelings that made me realize, I'm not alone, and this is normal.
Yeah.
This isn't me lacking or me not being enough,
right.
or, all of those negative emotions that automatically just that imposter syndrome, where you're just like, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you're going to mess this child's life up, where it's like,
it's truly the hardest job in the world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. And if there's anything else that I missed that you want to share that's important for our guests to know, please share it with us.
Yeah, no, I think that it's just been such a wonderful opportunity to be here and to share some wisdom. And I think the biggest piece, too, is that we're constantly learning. I'm learning, and we have to keep learning to be able to be our best version of ourselves. And like you said before, it's okay to make mistakes with our kids. It helps them to learn, too.
Yeah, and humanizing them, right? Yeah. Because I realized much later in life that, my parents are humans, they make mistakes, and it's a lot easier to forgive them for those errors when you're able to do that. And I guess being able to apologize and admit that you were wrong to your child does that maybe a little sooner for them. Yeah. And it makes them realize, mom's human too, and she makes mistakes, right? Yeah. I feel like I didn't realize that for so long.
No.
And it's not, and I'm not blaming my parents for that at all. It's sort of like you put your parents on a pedestal without even knowing it, right? And I think being able to be open with, my emotions without overburdening them, right? But without just letting them know, mommy makes mistakes too, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a connection that's important too, and can build so many bridges with your child.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time again,
Thank
and your wisdom. And I hope I can come to you for help, because, we all need it, I feel like.
It would be a pleasure always.
Gracias, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Unapparent Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, as we release a new episode at least every month with an exciting new guest. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram for all the unapparent content you never knew you needed.